Yeah, we'll get the gist of it.
We are going to do a sicha now with the help of Hashem that is from Likutei Siches, volume Hey, volume 5, Parshas Vayishlach, the first sicha on Vayishlach, and in Parshiyos, that's page 21. It's in Yiddish, and I'm going to go quite fast until we get to Dalit. Probably skip most of the footnotes because just want to do from the beginning so we have a full picture, but really that's where the Bnei Noach issue and all that. Okay, let's begin. Page 21 in Likutei Sichos Parshas Vayishlach. Fundem pasuk vayikchu shnei vnei Yaakov Shimon v'Levi achei Dina ish harbe goymer. From the verse in the Parsha Vayishlach which says, and the two sons of Yaakov, Shimon and Levi, the brothers of Dinah, each one of them took their sword. Now, this, of course, just to remind you, is the episode, the tragic episode where Yaakov and family arrive in Shechem, and his daughter was kidnapped and abused, and her two brothers, brother number 2 and 3, out of the 12 sons. So at that point, those two boys, Shimon and Levi, they decided to take the law into their own hands, and the two of them went and they killed out the entire city of Shechem. Okay, we all know that there's much more details to it, but that's basically what happened. Shimon v'Levi veren angerufen ish. Now, the key here is that in this verse, Shimon and Levi are called ish. It says they took ish harboy. Ish is one of the 4 terms we use for an adult man. One of the words we use for an adult man is ish. Therefore, was they seinen demolt alt given 13 Jahr. And the reason because they were actually 13 years old on that day. And in footnote 12 goes into the various sources. And if you ask, how could they both be the same age since they had the same mother? It wouldn't be a question if they had 2 different mothers, being that Yaakov had 4 wives, but they both came from Leah. So we don't mean that they both turned 13 on that day, but it does come out that Levi actually turned 13 that day, and Shimon was at least presumably 9 months older. But at the point is that they were 13 years old. Lernt men up. So from that, we learn out as wenn men werd alt 13 Jahr, that when one becomes 13 years old, right now we're speaking only about Jews. We didn't get to mention in Bnei Noach or Goyim at all. When one becomes 13 years old, werd men an ish, one becomes an ish. And then that individual is obligated to keep all of the mitzvahs as soon as he turns 13 years old. And that, of course, is where we get the concept of bar mitzvah at age 13, when a Jewish boy turns into a man. That is on his Jewish birthday of 13. This is the source. In Torah, in the Torah, after all, everything is exact and precise to the detail. Darfen verstehen. So based on that, the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach asks, Wie kommt es, as aza iker inyan in Yiddishkeit? How could it be that such a main idea of Judaism, namely, there's man, when der Yetzer Toiv kumt rein bamidin, the time where the Yetzer Toiv, the positive, the good inclination, enters into the Jew, der Gemar v'ikar knisas nefesh hakadoisha ba'adam, the completion, the finishing of the entrance of his holy soul, of his godly soul, because the beginning is at the bris. When the child is 8 days old and he's circumcised, that is the beginning of the entrance of his holy soul, and it slowly develops, and it's coming in more and more through his childhood education, etc., until the day of his 13th birthday, and that's when it's complete. So that's a very, very major thing in the Jew's life. Was dann häupt sich bei ihm an der Kiyuma Mitzvahs. And at that point begins by him the fulfillment of the mitzvahs. And footnote 6, we deal with the idea that what are you doing about the mitzvahs beforehand? So basically it's just chinuch, it's education. All right. That it's I don't want to say the word practice, it's inauguration, it's a form of training, of practice. But the mitzvah or the obligation, or when he's held accountable and responsible and he has to keep all the mitzvahs, that starts from his 13th birthday. So how could such a major concept, soll men das ablernen, we should learn it, von vayikchu shnei bnei Yaakov gomer ish charboy. We have a verse that's telling us a story about the two sons of Yaakov, calling them each ish, and they took their swords. This was seemingly an inappropriate conduct. All right. Their father was very upset. They did not seek his approval, and they just did this zealous act, similar or one. It reminds us of the sikha that we just did about Pinchas, but that was a proper thing to do, and he only got rewarded for doing it, and nobody told him off. Here, on the contrary, their father was very upset, and even later on, when he's lying on his deathbed, Yaakov, he mentions their anger and their haste in doing this act. So Yaakov did not approve. So how are we learning out the concept of a Jewish man becoming obligated in fulfilling the commandments at age 13 from something which was somewhat inappropriate? It's true. Oichin pashtus is muvan, that it's understood as their mitvos vayargu kol zocher, with the fact that they killed out every male of Shechem. Zainen ze nit bagangin kenisur chas v'shalom. They didn't transgress any prohibition. Let's not make it worse than it was. Let's not turn them chas v'shalom into murderers. All right? They didn't do any sin. Because they deserved to be killed, which is a different sikha altogether. And, why did they kill them and so forth? And that sikha, I think, that we've learned at least years ago. So the people of Shechem, they were obligated to be put to death for transgressing Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach, because, well, of course, Chamor himself for kidnapping and for raping, but then the rest of the people, since they failed to bring him to judgment, so that means that they did not have the establishment of courts of law to uphold the 6 commandments, and that means that they're all transgressors. There's a lot to explain, but that's like, okay, so they're all of them are liable for the death penalty. Therefore, was they haben nicht gemishpat Shechemen, far sein verbrechen. I'm sorry, was Shechem not Chamor. For the fact that they didn't judge Shechem, far sein verbrechen, for his breaking the law. Oder, or alternatively, for their own sin. They themselves were sinners before the whole story with Dinah, as he references in footnote 9, the Ramban, Nachmanides, on his commentary on the Pasuk, and likewise the commentary of the Ran, Rabbeinu Nisim, in Talmud Sanhedrin 56b. Be that as it may, we know, according to the oral tradition, according to the commentaries, they all had transgressed a capital offense for Bnei Noach. That's fine. So they all, so Shimon and Levi killed people that were to be killed. That's fine. Von deswegen, however, nonetheless, gefindt men doch, we do find though, as oti hanhag von Shimon and Levi, that this behavior of Shimon and Levi, of so to say taking the law into their own hands and doing justice for what they did, etc., is Yaakov Avinu nit gefallen geworden. It didn't find favor in Yaakov. He did not like what they did. Bis hot sie batzeichend via Zach von Klei Chamas, to the point where he pointed it out. He calls this vessels of destruction. Instead of calling their sword vessels of justice, he's calling it in derogatory term. As umnus zu shel retzicha, that this profession of murder, chotch sie is demolt given uisgehalten leutendin, even though at that point it was appropriate, it was legal what they did, is it zu gekommen von Esaven. Where they get this from, they got it from their uncle, Esav. So Yaakov said, true, what you did technically was fine. But I don't like the approach. I don't like the manner. I don't like, and where did you get this idea of being so trigger happy? How do you take two of you? You take your swords and you wipe out the entire city, every single male. I know where you got that from. That's my brother, Esav. Okay, so it's a negative trait. Und das wird doch angedeutet in die Wörter, and this is actually emphasized in the words von dem Pasukufa of the verse itself, Vayikchu shnei vnei Yaakov goimer, and the two sons of Yaakov, etc. Warum? Because Visendik shoin von frier, we already know from before, as Shimon v'Levi zayin b'nei Yaakov. Why does the verse have to tell us here that Shimon and Levi, the sons of Yaakov? We know that. They were born, and it identifies each one and the name that he was given. We know the names of all of the sons of Yaakov. Darfman became Zogin as their meat veret gemeint. So we have to say that when the verse here is telling us that they're the sons of Yaakov, what's meant is trotz them was they sein given bnei Yaakov. Even though, although they were bnei Yaakov, which means they should behave in a certain way, haben sie sich aber gefiert. However, how did they behave? As Rashi brings down from the Medrash, kishar anoshim, like the rest of the people, she'einam banav, that are not the sons of Yaakov, shalei not loetza heimenu, for they did not take counsel from him. They didn't ask their father, should we do this? You're about to do such a major thing, you know? Don't you think it's appropriate to ask your father whether this is the right thing to do or not?
So Rabbi Turen another way would say they took the law in their own hand. Oh.
Well, they took the law into their own hands. But again, it's not that they were wrong, but the fact that they didn't ask their father, the pasuk is pointing out a negative point here.
Even by Pinchas, right? He went to Moshe Rabbeinu.
That's right. Until Moshe said, this is not a question to be asked. Right. And you can't say that, they knew that it's not a question to be asked, because that's not the case here. You know, you can't say that they knew that in this case, you have to put them all to death and don't ask any questions. Because that's not the case here. Pinchas, that was the halacha. Here, it's not. This, you know.
Okay. So the biggest thing was that they didn't go to the Nasi to ask permission.
They didn't ask Pops. Yeah, they behaved like anyone else. So seemingly, apparently, it comes out as euch der pasuk meint mit zu sagen dem Hebech von Shevach. It seems like this pasuk, this verse, is also trying to bring out a derogatory point here. That even though they're Bnei Yaakov, they should have consulted with him and they didn't. Und von deswegen hat Teure ausgeklimmen Dafka at dem Pasuk. Now we're summing up the question. This was all, you know. And nonetheless, the Torah chooses specifically this verse of all verses, of all sources, the inyan, and this theme, if up to learn out from it, dem zman fun aschala sachir b'mitzvah chuli. When does a Jew become obligated in keeping mitzvahs? When does that time start? So we're learning it out from these two great righteous people that it starts from age 13 because they are called Ish. Very strange. Is there fun gufa gedrungen? So from this itself is understood, it's derived as the hanhaga fun vayikhu gamer ish harboy, that this behavior of, as the verse says, that each one of these two Ish took his sword, etc. You have to say there's something very great, very positive in this behavior. And as we're going to explain later in the next piece, and then later on in the Sikha, you have to say that there's something very great and positive, even though, fine, there is negativity to it. There's what to criticize. Yaakov criticizes them for it. But you have to say that there's something really positive if you're going to learn from here. This is the Torah source. The Bar Mitzvah is age 13.
Wow.
Seems strange.
I never knew that before.
The Yuvan, that's actually Machlekes Rishonim, but whatever. The Yuvan behektim was der Medrash sagt. We will understand this by first prefacing what it says in a Medrash. If the Verter, and the words are later on, when Yaakov Avinu is on his so-called deathbed, and he's giving the final blessings and prophecies to every one of his children. So over there in Parshas Vayechi, it says about what does Yaakov say about these two? Kiva'apam hargu ish. That in their wrath, in their anger, they killed ish, a man. So that's the verse. What does the Medrash say? V'chi ish echad hargu. What do you mean they killed a man out of their anger? Did they kill only one man? The verse says in our Parsha Vayishlach, they killed every male member of the city. What do you mean they killed a man? Ella, rather, but they were all considered in the eyes of Hashem like one man. Okay, we have this in other places as well, where we find the word ish in the singular, even though it means many. So here too, the Medrash says to teach us that when Shimon and Levi killed all those people, in the eyes of Hashem, it's considered that they killed one man, ish. That's the Medrash. At first, we can ask, their Lashon Hargu Ish, this language of the Pasuk that Yaakov says they killed an Ish, Al Pi Bir HaMedrash, according to the Medrash, Volke past would fit, would be appropriate, blois only, dan then, when the Pe'ula von Shimon V'Levi, Vayargo Kol Zachar, when the effect, the accomplishment of Shimon and Levi killing every male, Volke ven leiten ratzen von dem Eibestern. Only if it's according to the will of Hashem can you say that in the eyes of Hashem, it's like one man. If what they did was appropriate according to Hashem. And since in the eyes of Hashem, all those people they killed are like one man, so too, that's what all those people are worth in the eyes of Shimon and Levi, who were fulfilling the will of Hashem. If in Hashem's eyes, all those men, all those males are like one person, so too, the ones which are behaving, the ones which are implementing the will of Hashem, in their eyes, it's also like one person. And therefore, they receive from him, from Hashem, the strength to do this. And how did they succeed to do such a massive thing? Two 13-year-olds to kill out everybody. Sure, it was the third day after the bris, but still in all, it was a pretty interesting trick that they had. That's because they had Hashem's power.
Would it be a far stretch to say that each echad is because they became a collective, they became all guilty as a collective whole?
Very good. The Dagachover says that there's no such thing as a tzibur by non-Jews. That concept only applies by Eden, by Jews.
Wow.
Even though we find by Mitzrayim, that it says sus paroi, whatever. Okay. But the concept of kishachad b'leiv echad.
So in order for it to be each echad, they all individually had to be mechuyev in Misa.
Yeah, and we have to say that in Hashem's eyes it was like
Not as the collective, but as individuals.
Yeah. Okay. Let's try to go quickly. We're almost out of time.
Yeah. Please go. Just go.
Gefint men dochaber. However, we find as Yaakov Avinu had ze gar gestrofen. However, the problem is we find that Yaakov Avinu, he actually cursed them. He bawled them out. Fardem was papam hargu, that they killed with their anger. Onemendik, accepting as they haben getan adavar bilti ratzui. In Yaakov's eyes, they did something which is not appropriate, inappropriate, undesirable. Bis zu sagen, to the point that to say die gebracht führen sie like we said previously, as das is a tchuna was stammt gar von Esavin, that this is a quality, this is a human nature, which actually comes from where? How do they have this in their genes? Uncle Esav. And Yaakov is not a big fan of his twin brother. So they have it from Esav. That's the way Yaakov viewed it. Even though you did the right thing. But I know where your impetus and I know where your whole drive came from, even though you used it out in a good way. And now, wie kann man sagen, how can we say, as der Far steht by demselben hargu, but how can you say that by the same word that says that they killed ish, so we have a problem here. Yaakov is the tzaddik. Yaakov's understanding and his approach and his will is in sync with whatever is correct according to Hashem. But it seems like you're saying that in Hashem's view, it was good. It was one man. And Yaakov is very upset. Something's off over here. So what's going on over here? Was it a good thing or was it not a good thing? Even though it wasn't a sin, that's not good enough. Muzman Zogin, we must say, Yaakov Avinu hat gehalten, Yaakov Avinu held as der Eufen von Zeir Bastrofen, that the fashion, the way of their punishing, the Anshe Shechem, the people of Shechem, is nicht given wie es darf sein, was not the way it was supposed to be. He's not arguing with the verdict and with the punishment, but the way they went about doing it. Aber es hat sie gekommen, der Einish Misa Kanal Sif Aleph. Yaakov agrees that all those men were to be put to death. They were guilty of a capital offense. Because the problem is the way you guys did it, Shimon and Levi, you have made me murky amongst the people sitting in the land over here. That's what he tells them right away. As soon as he found out about it, and he gets really upset with his two sons, he says, why'd you do that? And you're making me murky in the eyes of all the inhabitants over here. So in other words, there's a reputation here that's at stake. He didn't say, why did you kill innocent people? He didn't say that at all. Und dem Tam von Yankovin, and what is the reason of Yaakov? What's wrong? Why is he so upset if they did the right thing ultimately? That we can explain in two ways. Aleph A, wie bald as der einziger natürlicher Weg, since the only way according to the rules of nature, wie azoi zu durchführen ot die Straf, the only way to implement this punishment auf die Anshe Shechem, on the people of Shechem, in other words, they have to be killed, hat demolt gekannt sein, nur durch benutzen sich mit a Mittel was zet uis wie Mirma. Since the only way to give them what they deserve, which is death, could only have been done through trickery. That's what they did. They came up with this plan and they said, we're only going to marry you guys if you all are circumcised. And therefore everybody, so they made a major campaign and then Shechem convinced everybody to circumcise themselves. And on the third day, which is the most difficult, they went out. it seems very not kosher. It doesn't look nice. Frier, einreden sie, als ob sie wollen sich mal sein, first to convince them that if they're going to circumcise themselves, Ismen ze maftiach, we promise you then, as we'll sit with you, we'll settle here, we'll become one nation. So they said, that's not exactly true. Und das mit der Kavana, and they said that with the intention, as später, later on, wird man die Avtacha nicht mekayim sein. We're not going to keep our promise. We promise you that if you circumcise yourselves, we'll intermingle and we'll assimilate and we'll marry you, you marry us. They had no intentions of keeping that promise. Und noch ton verkehrter von. They actually had in mind to do the exact opposite. As they actually did. Now remember, what is the quality of Yaakov if you got to sum it up in one word? What is the tzad?
Emes.
That's it. So you can't have no tricks, no lies. That's why it's so incredible of how he has to deal with Lavan. Lavan was the biggest trickster and the biggest liar ever in history, and Yaakov is the exact opposite ever. So how Hashem has the two, yeah.
Beautiful.
Therefore, hot Yaakov gehalten, therefore Yaakov held, as men darf ze bichlal nit hargenen, that practically speaking, don't kill them. Not legally, practically. Yaakov held we have no recourse, let's not do anything. In order to avoid the desecration of Hashem's name. Which could come out of this. Uvidugma, for example, as we find, so we find later on the Givoinim, which were non-Jews, as man hat geändert von dem, was Torah hat angesagt, wegen der Hanhaga Mitzvah. We changed from what the Torah says we're supposed to behave with them. In order not to transgress the promise that we gave them. You know, they tricked us, but at the end of the day, we promised them something. So therefore, we let them join the Jewish people. Because if we wouldn't have done that as a nation, if we would have just told the Givonim, no, you don't belong to the Jewish people, even though they disguised and they tricked us, and there was a whole story that they did, but nonetheless, we felt at that time that we had to accept them to avoid making a Chilul Hashem. So that's what Yaakov held. That's one way to explain it over here. We have no choice, and there are a lot of criminals going around, a lot of people that are committing capital offenses. We can't walk around and, and judge everybody and then go get and kill them. Beis, the other approach to explain why Yaakov was upset with his sons, Adrabah. On the contrary, Yaakov held, as men darf ze take yehargenen. Of course, you have to kill them. Yaakov wasn't upset that with the result. Of course, you have to kill all of them. But why trickery? Why you playing this game? Was can Geirim sein zu Chilul Hashem? That can cause a desecration of Hashem's name. Nor b'reish kalei, let's go kill them outright. Because being in the eyes of Hashem, they're one person. Don't say we're outnumbered, we're just a few people. In the eyes of Hashem, we have Hashem on our side, we're on Hashem's side. They're like one person. He's klal nitov vas meidit zu haben farzeh. Therefore, there's nothing to worry about. And Yaakov is not saying, let's take nature into account. There's no nature. So he was upset either way you look at it. Two opposite ways. The second way is saying, you shouldn't have tricked them. We should have gone out there and killed them all outright, and we would have been successful. But either way, from two opposite ends, Yaakov was upset with the way they went about killing them, with the trickery. But besides that, Yaakov surely knew as Shimon v'Levi, loit zeir mahus. Shimon and Levi, according to their real essence, nature, haben fort nicht gedarft und nicht gekonnt sich rechnen mit den Cheshben von Machartem Oisi. Yaakov knew they couldn't take into account this idea of not making Yaakov, his name, look murky. They can't do that. Why? They respond back to their father. When their father got all upset when he heard what happened, and he initially, gets really upset with them, they respond and they tell him, Hakizoina, a rhetorical question, like a harlot, will they make our sister? So this brought out by them tremendous act of being zealots, just like we had with Pinchas. So that's what brought out in them. So they were zealous. The Kedusha in a good way. By Pinchasin. So it really fits with what we just finished learning. This is similar to Pinchas. Kanoi ben Kanoi, Levi. As a matter of fact, who was Pinchas's great-great-great-grandfather? Levi.
Wow.
Levi. So where do you think he got it from? So Pinchas got it from Levi. So Shimon and Levi are both zealots. Was kina der lang doch gar tief benefesh. And to have kina, that type of attribute, even in the good way, it's very, very deeply rooted in one's soul. And as it says, kasha kishoil kina, that verse is saying it in a negative sense, that kina, jealousy, or being a zealot, is very, very tough, very hard. Bees in etzem achaim, to the point that it actually reaches a person's core of their very life. In etzem anefesh, it's the actual, it could reach the core of one's soul. Especially if it's a great kina, like in this case. Once you hit the core essence of one's soul, there's no room for any calculations. There's no room for feelings or for logic or for intellect or for any discussion. You hit the core essence, that's it. So being that it wasn't just, well,
you have to be true to your soul at the end of the day.
It's not just a calculation. So therefore they couldn't say, really we should ask. There's nothing. Once they got to that point, there's no stopping them and there's no asking.
Wow.
Und wie bald das bei Shimon v'Levi steht in der Tnua, ständig in der Tnua von Kanes Kinasi, and being that Shimon and Levi were in this mode of, and we're borrowing the term that we had says by Pinchas, that he is being a zealot for my sake, Hashem says. This is a situation where you're totally beyond any calculations and any rationale. It had to be, there was no choice. It had to be in such a fashion that each one of them took their sword and they killed every male. In dem Oifen, had to be that way. Is b'meile verstandig, so therefore it's understood as in zeir peula, that in their action hat sich ausgedrückt koiche shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem's energy is expressed in their actions and their behavior. Und der Far steht auf dem hargu ish, and therefore it says they killed a person. So in other words, Yaakov is 100%, he is entitled to being upset, as we're going to see later, and he was upset, and Shimon and Levi couldn't do it any other way. It's just, that's the way it's got to be. Sorry. So, okay, I mean, there's more to discuss, but we're going to have to leave it at this. So we got up to Gimel. I know we went pretty fast, and then we're still going to do Gimel, and then afterwards we're going to slow down. Okay.
Thank you. I got a quick question.
Yes.
Is this one of the reasons why the 10 martyrs, one of the 10 martyrs had to, is that not it?
That's the sale of Yosef.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay.
Yeah.
All righty.
It was just these two that were involved in this.
Okay.
Wow, that was from the Mechiras Yosef. Ooh.
I know
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking at first. I was like, was that the thing? Because it was actually. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Rabbi Turen. I appreciate it.
Sure.
James.
All the best.
God willing, see you next week.
Amen.
Mirza Hashem, yeah.